Let's get started. So before we begin, I just want to say that we'll be abiding by the CNCF Code of Conduct, and this meeting will be recorded, so if you don't consent, please hop off. So happy February. We have a couple things on the agenda that we wanted to talk about. I guess first announcement kind of a thing is that we did hear back about the CFP that Audie and I submitted. Unfortunately, we were not accepted to talk, but we did resubmit the talk for the co-located events. So we actually submitted for Kubernetes on Edge, and we'll hear back about that in a month in March. So yeah. The next thing I guess we want to talk about is breaking up the repos. So right now we have everything sort of consolidated into like the big Akri repository on GitHub. But there have been talks previously about breaking it up into different little sections, like having Akri core and then the different discovery handlers and then the samples. So I just wanted to get everyone's opinions about that, and maybe we can, assign some work to people in the community to break it up accordingly.
So I think it's helpful to think about all the different ways we could break it up. So yeah, we can go as granular as possible, which includes even moving the controller and agent into their own repositories, or we can just remove things that are non-production, which I think is highest priority. So for example, we don't claim our sample applications or brokers to be production. So, I mean, we don't claim Akri necessarily to be 1.0, but those in particular, we're not expecting for people to use in actual scenarios. And so I think maybe we can jot down kind of the priorities of what we want to move out. And for me personally, it would be moving sample brokers and sample applications out. And then the follow-up question becomes to where? So do we have Akri brokers and then Akri samples? Or do we have a separate repository for every broker and sample?
I like personally, I think it'd be easier if we made everything in one repo, just so we could point everyone to one particular repo. I know with other projects I've seen, they've done it the other way. It can be a little bit harder to find the samples or something like that. But that does also mean that we might just be moving this problem from one repo to another, where if there's a bug in one sample or anything, we'd probably have to fix it in that repo as well. So but I think it'd just be easier to like take a look at one sample repo and just look at everything though.
And just to clarify, yeah, you're saying one repo for all samples and okay, and then one repo for all brokers.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that sounds fine to me. I think discovery handlers, when we get into that discussion, I think those should be their own repositories, in part because some of them are specific to specific platforms, which is the case with also our samples. But for example, the UDEV discovery handler, if you're working on a non-UDEV OS, so if you're on Windows or Mac OS, you're going to get errors trying to compile that, and it's not it's not gated throughout that code. So it's really hard to develop with that. And also discovery handlers are fit certain audiences. So in the IoT world, some people are really interested in ONVIF and others are really interested in Modbus. They don't necessarily need to be concerned with other protocols and those code bases. And so I can see that being a reason for having discovery handlers all in their own repository.
I think one thing we should also consider is that if we're going to move each discovery handler into its own repo, we should make sure that the Helm charts don't, like that entire flow would have to change, I guess. We have to make sure that each discovery handler could be published to the main Akri Helm chart, or if there's another way we could like essentially like push to one main branch or something like that. I'm not sure how it would work, but we'd have to see how that flow would go.
All the Helm charts are doing are pointing to the container image. So it would just be making sure that the container image for those discovery handlers are what we'd expect. I do think that's a fair point though. We're gonna need to adjust our GitHub workflows. I'm not a GitHub workflow expert. Like my scope with GitHub workflows is within one repository. I don't know if you can kick off workflows, like have one workflow be a predecessor for another, which is what we have for our workflows. So we'll build the Rust code for all of our projects. So for the agent, the controller, and then our discovery handlers, and then we'll have subsequent builds that will because we'll cross build it. So we'll cross build that code for ARM and x64, and then we'll then containerize our discovery handlers and all of our different projects. So I don't know if we can do that across repositories. So we might need to have some duplication of workflows or have someone who just looks into that. But that is going to take a little extra work as well. And so one way to go about this, what I would think we would do is if we think we're going to have a period of less development in these areas that we've talked about. So samples, brokers, discovery handlers, we can go ahead and not like take it out of the main code base, but just like duplicate it into the new repository. And then once we have that stably building and those workflows going, then we can remove it from the main code base. Would it be how I think we could stably do this?
I think that sounds good to me. Should we make an item on the GitHub to say just like keep track of this, I guess?
I believe we have one. Let me double check.
Okay.
Yeah, issue 489. I think Rashid at one point was looking at this. He was taking on a lot of different issues. And then Jean Bonneau looked at taking it over. I think at this point, that's when the holidays hit. So I'll put this issue in here. I'll put it in the notes. But maybe we can ping them one more time to see if either of them are interested in taking it on. And then if neither of them are able to, is anyone else interested in this? I can also work with someone on this. We could have like a hackathon day on a Friday where we just try and move everything over, which might be a good idea to kind of do that in one day. I think it might be important for this task to be done by someone who has admin permissions of the Akri project, because you're going to need to create a new repository several times, which we can do. We can set someone up for success with that, which I think we might have done for Rashid, but I'm not sure. So how about this? How about I'll ask if either of them are interested, and if they are, also offer to provide assistance and maybe like do that in pairing with that. And then if neither of them are interested, if anyone on this call is interested, just check out that issue and we can try and hop on that.
Yeah, I'm happy to help if they're not interested on that one. So let's ask them first before we move forward.
Sounds
Yeah, that sounds like a good plan. Also, here's the link to the notes in case everyone doesn't have it yet. If all the attendees could add their name and company under the attendees section, that would be helpful for us. I think, is there anything else? Any other thoughts about this from anyone else? Okay. So the next thing that I guess we should mention is that over the holidays, the Akri website did go down. I think it was because the domain had expired or something like that. So Audie worked to get that fixed, thankfully. So the docs and the website is back up. Yeah, is there anything you want to talk about with that, Audie?
I think it was mostly just mentioning that the website's back up. If anyone was interested in like what exactly happened and wanted to know more about it, there was a GitHub issue that we had filed like to track that. I can pull that one up and link it in the chat, but essentially like there was a miscommunication with like the domain as we were like transferring it over. And so we had to just spin up our own instance of like the DNS and everything. Once we got that set up again, it was good to go.
Yeah, thank you for that, Audie. And okay, so the next thing that I wanted to talk about was that Audie and I have submitted this secrets authentication proposal, or actually it was Johnson on our team. He put together this proposal and he's created a PR for it on the docs, and I can share my screen. So yeah, right now, we don't really have a way to connect to devices that require authentication, like for example, on with cameras, right? And there's like an issue to track that as well. And we have this proposal to have the agent be able to pass Kubernetes secrets to the discovery handlers so that we can actually connect to authenticated cameras. So Audie, do you want to maybe speak on this?
Yeah. So to sort of like start where we were thinking about this, it wasn't necessarily like the only way we wanted to do authentication. This was just if we wanted to do some form of like secrets handling and management out of the box with Akri without anything other than just like the native Kubernetes offered frameworks, I guess, or the whatever Kubernetes offers. So the way we were envisioning this is that like if you have like a factory line or something and you have a bunch of devices that you want to just connect with secrets, whether it's like a username password or if it's a certificate or anything else that it needs to be shared. When you have those devices, you would then, or sorry, when you buy those devices, you would then have like a list of this device corresponds to this password, this certificate. And then during the initial process where we have like the operator say, we have these OnViv devices or these like UDEV devices or these OPCOA devices, like whatever the protocol may be. As part of that, we also say, these are the secrets that we need. These are like the discovery properties that we have essentially. And then we move forward from there. We take that in, and then since the agent has access to the API server, we were saying the agent could populate that secret in the secret store. And then from there, when we do discovery, we would look up and say, you could modify the discovery handler itself to have some sort of like secret value that it needs in. I think there are extra properties we can pass in as part of like, I think it was like the discovery request or yeah, it was the discover request as it says right there. And then you could essentially have that secret ready. So when you do see a device, you could try testing to see, is it the valid secret or not? If so, you can report back a true, like we've seen this device. If not, you can just ignore it and then move on and try another secret or keep looking for devices. Again, this is just if we were to do it with Akri alone, not with anything else that we've seen before. I think we've mentioned like Dapper in the past and a few other CNCF projects, but this was a proposal on how we could do secret management. So Eugene, if you could scroll down a little bit. Or yeah, I think this should be fine. So, or a little bit higher. Sorry, I think I'm lagging. Yeah, perfect. So we have this like sort of like value from, and it's either like something from the config map or from the secret key reference. So we're saying like we have some secret called my secret, and the key is like username or something that we need. And then there's another one in the same one called my secret, and it's called password. So essentially, by providing this in the agent itself, what we do is, because we have API access, we would go ahead and look up to see what those secret values are, populate them, and then as we do discovery, we'd be able to reference them and see whether or not the device we have is like the true device, or is it just another device or something we don't even want to detect. And then if you scroll all the way down, Eugen, the two other considerations we had were how would we store the secret itself? Because Kubernetes by default doesn't do encryption at rest, there are newer parameters that you can use in Kubernetes now that enable encryption at rest. So, and you can also like have access permission on it. That was the quickest way we thought of for like encrypting everything as it travels as well. But then for cloud storage, we were saying that the secret source CSI driver, and there's a few other ways you could do it, essentially would just populate the secret from any cloud store that you have. Yeah, so that's pretty much just the proposal of if we wanted to get secrets into the devices themselves and to authenticate, how would we do that?
Thank you. So yeah, does anyone have any questions or thoughts about this?
I personally need a little bit more time to look at this. Yeah, I'm curious, did y'all end up getting a chance to look at Drogue?
Yeah, so that's actually what we were looking at for like a longer term, like it's a bit more robust. This was literally just if we wanted to do everything on our own essentially without having extra dependencies or extra contain, like I think we talked about like how we could have like a sidecar in a way that would like load up, have the secrets there. This was just if we didn't want to do any of that, just like what's the I guess it was like what's the proof of concept or the like native way we would do it. But we did start looking into Drogue a bit. I also did look at Dapper a lot more. So those are like two things I would like prefer to use in like prod, but this is just the like native way to do it.
Yeah, and I think that this way makes a lot of sense. And then it gives you a way that you could pass in like some root credentials or something along those lines. Not root credentials, but like a root certificate, CA cert type thing. And then allows the whoever's writing the broker or this, sorry, discovery handler. I'm jet lagged. Whoever's writing the discovery handler could then take it and expand on that, right, using whatever mechanism they want. And so I think this gives a lot of additional flexibility to kind of pass that in.
Yeah, definitely. I'd actually say that this is one thing where we sort of like trust the discovery handler a bit more now. We're trusting that like implementation that it'll do the proper verification. One of the other things that came out of this discussion was actually just that point, which was if we try to do more custom configurations in the agent where like we try to verify elsewhere, it's a little tougher for us to say because we don't know for each protocol, we don't really know what is like a valid case and what is not a valid case. Like we don't know how to verify in every case. So that was one thing we wanted to try to make sure that the discovery handler was the one that was in charge of the authentication.
Yeah, and I think every single user is going to have different needs, different operational constraints. So I think having that flexibility makes a lot of sense.
Follow up. I like how this is pretty open so that, yeah, like Andrew was saying, the discovery handler kind of takes control of what things look like. So what kind of secrets it expects and how it matches a specific secret to a device that's in a discovery handler's domain, not Akri's. And I like that. Because then it provides flexibility for people. I'm curious, and maybe you already touched on this and I missed it, but why discovery properties? I'm noticing in the example configuration, there's the first one is like name, some common data, and some blob value. What was the motivation behind this, not just containing secrets, but also it sounds like other tangential information? And I'm curious what example you see for that extra information.
Just to like make sure I'm getting the question right, it's like the extra, like for example, like the plain text data that we're also including, or other things like that, that just or like the config map data that isn't really a secret, but just something we're passing in. I think the main motivation was that some protocols have extra information you can pass in. I'm not 100% sure what the exact use case was. I think it was with either OnVIF or OPC-UA, where it was you could pass in extra things like I need this specific frame rate, or I need this specific like this specific device property. I forget what it was. I can double check, but it was basically like something that wasn't really a secret, but if you wanted to like configure your device that way, you could. There were so many different device configuration options that we just said, yeah, we should be able to add something that isn't necessarily your like authentication token, but like some other parameter you may want to reference.
So, and is that information you're trying to pass to the broker ultimately, like use this frame rate, or is that filtering information? Because if it's filtering information, it should go into discovery details. I think we need to be clear about in our discovery handler configuration, what is a part of the filtering, what is a part of the discovery, and what is a part of the like authentication. Like I just want to make sure we get a clear delineation between this discovery details and discover properties. And I worry that those are both too vaguely named. And discovery details is already vague. If we throw a discovery properties in there, which is pretty vague as well in naming, that might get a little confusing. So I don't know if we need to scope down that name more. And if there is a scenario that needs this plain text data and it doesn't fit into discovery details, we should create a third section is my immediate thought, rather than trying to create just something open-ended where we can put everything in there.
Okay, that's a fair point. I don't believe it should be a filter. I'll double check to make sure. But yeah, let's maybe like rename that to like, or move it elsewhere, I guess. Yeah.
I'll add a comment to the PR to just kind of see what the original thought process was. Does anyone have any, it sounds like we've got a lot of positive thoughts here. I think if anything, this unblocks things. I'd be curious if people have any concerns, and also if people see how this can evolve, because I think we've talked about how this is almost a first iteration of things. So we want to keep in mind how we can do this in a way where we won't have breaking changes in the future and we can continue to build off of it.
Yeah, so I've linked this PR in the notes, so feel free to take a look and give us any feedback. That would be really helpful for us. And I think, yeah, Audie and I will work to get maybe a prototype of this. So once we have that, we can definitely share in the next meeting or so.
Yeah, and if you even have it before, like sharing it on Slack, do we kind of have a timeline for this work?
Audie, how's the progress on that?
We had done a bit of the original, like, I guess like prototyping with the individual components. Like I think we had tried to get secrets in. We'd gotten secrets from like a cloud store key vault, and we'd done encryption on rest. I think what we're trying to do is put it all together now. Basically make sure that we can pull it from the cloud, still encrypt it, and pass it through. But yeah, I think within the next few weeks we'll have like a full demo that we could show off and say, here we're pulling from like, you know, the HashiCorp vault, and then we're now encrypting it at rest and then going from there.
How does this work compare to the Leo's previous device registry work? To me, it seems like it's taking a completely different path. But I just wanted to see if other people saw the same. The reason I see that is instead of the discovery handler going to a centralized device registry to say, hey, I found this device, give me the secret, it's instead has a secret, and it says, oh, I found this device, I was given this secret. Does that match? I could see it being that these config maps ultimately could work with a device registry because the config map would then have a list of, maybe it's a map of the device MAC address, for example, with its device registry identifier, and then it knows how to go to the device registry and get the key. So maybe it's a flexible system as well and could ultimately work with a device registry as well.
Yeah, that's what I would expect to see in production. Just because I really do think that every single environment is going to be different enough that they're going to have different needs that we can't address in a single way. But for like the demo and the samples, this works really nicely and shows. I think it tells the story well, right?
And what you're saying is it has the flexibility to support something in production. So in production, you can make discovery properties strong enough to use your production scenario.
Exactly. Yeah, and you would probably in production, you probably would have some device registry that you would set up against. You might be doing something with FIDO. You might be doing right. There's other kind of onboarding protocols that you might be able to work alongside. But again, it's going to be like, what devices did they buy? What systems integrator are you working with? All those type of, yeah. There's so many people. There's so many different companies that make up a big solution that we would be sitting inside.
All right.
It's going.
Mhm.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say it's going to get really complicated really fast.
Yeah. Let me pull up notes again. Are there any other thoughts on this? Okay. So yeah, I think we've covered all the agenda items. So if there's any other open topics that people want to bring up or discuss, let us.
Yeah, I have some thoughts. I feel like there's been a pickup in like urgency from users on issues. There's a couple issues in particular where people are like, this is blocking me. And then a couple weeks later, like, this is still blocking me. But it's not clear who's going to do the work. So I don't know if we need to figure out a way of work or a system of how to get like figuring out who we have available to do work, I think is something we need to address. And also figuring out how to turn people who are interested in something getting done into contributors. I think we've fallen behind on that. So yeah, just some general thoughts about that. I think there are several issues and we haven't made a lot of progress in the past month or two, and just talking about why we think that is and how we think we can make some small gains in this coming month to feel like we're picking up pace again.
We did hire an engineer, kind of mid-level, that is starting, I think, 2 weeks from now. That will most likely be full-time on Akri. So, yeah. I'm hoping that next month I'll probably do an introduction, give him kind of between his start date and that to kind of run through the samples, figure stuff out, see how it plays with the rest of the ecosystem, that type of thing. And then, yeah, see kind of what we triage next month and have them start going.
Awesome. That's super exciting to hear. Yeah, and I think so. Audie and I paired last Friday, and I think I'm not a Twitch streamer, but I think we can do something where we can have like group pairing sessions to familiarize people with the code base that maybe we can make more open to people. And that might make it more approachable for them to onboard, and also just get people in general more familiar with the code base, if that sounds interesting to people.
Yeah, I feel like that's a good idea because I feel like even for me, I'm still like familiarizing myself with the code base. So I think something like that would be really helpful, especially for the new people that have kind of joined the community. And yeah, I think I can also take a look at those pressing issues and try to triage them among some of the devs at Microsoft as well.
Yeah, and I think we did that maybe a few meetings ago where we kind of listed out the ones that we wanted to do, and maybe we were over optimistic. We have 25 minutes. Maybe one thing we can do is try and pick like 6 issues that we think we can do, 4 of them this month and by the end of this month and or by next mini meeting, and then 2 that we're going to do within the next 2 months. Maybe we can do something along those lines, and just see as time goes on how good we are at being accurate in those assessments, and kind of tracking that so we know, okay, maybe we were a little too optimistic again, let's do less this time again. But that way we can, see ourselves being accountable for things, and also see ourselves accomplishing the things that we expected to.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. So should we maybe circle back on those previous issues that we brought up?
That's a great idea. Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, so this first one is enable mounting connectivity information for multiple devices and instances in a pod. So it looks like Harrison had previously volunteered to take this on. So yeah, is there any progress on this, Harrison, or do you have any questions about this issue?
Yeah, so I was working on this one, and I guess I was still a little confused about like what we should do with the hashing. Like, should we still stick with naming the environment variable with the hash, or should we find another way to make it easier? And I think when I was working on it, I was trying to just name it with the ID of the device, but I don't know if that makes sense. And I had the code for that, but I didn't make any PR because I don't know if people agreed with that way. So I think this one, if it's possible, we can still like talk about it a little more so that we are just making sure we are on the same page of what we should do for this.
Sorry, will you drop this issue link in the chat? Or I guess I can scroll to it just so I can read to the top of it again. Yeah, why don't we spend like 3 minutes on this and give it some extra time? Uh, Harrison, will you give us just a refresher on this? Or I'm happy to also.
Yeah, so basically we want to change the environment variable name to ensure we can have multiple environment variables mounted to one broker. But the problem is I think we wanted to name it along with the device hash, but the device hash is computed inside the agent where the environment variable is populated in the discovery handler. So by the time that we populate the environment variables, we don't have any information about the hash. Because the discovery handler didn't know anything about like it, whether it's shared or not.
Right. So we mount an environment variable with discovery information. That environment variable is always debug echo description or OnVIF discovery URL. So even if you discover 2 USB cameras, so dev node video 1 and video 0, the agent would overwrite that udev dev node environment variable to just be video 1 instead of udev dev node 1, udev dev node 2.
Right.
And so our question is, how do we mount both information as through device plugin into these brokers? I don't believe we can use a config map with device plugin, but that would be also an option, is to somehow like do it with a config map. But the option it looks like you're doing here, Harrison, which is one I think we discussed, is essentially adding a suffix to the environment variable name. So that what the discovery handler does is it looks for all environment variables with the prefix, which used to be the full environment variable name. And then each one of those is a device that has access to. Is that a correct summary?
Yes, that's right. And for the prefix, I also wasn't sure because for some devices, let's say for OPC UA, I guess that if you use prefix, they might also be the same in some way sometimes. So I guess like my main blocker here is just I wasn't sure what to use to describe the environment variable name.
I think we can use instance name. So that is the hash, but it has a little bit, it has the hash and more. So if we do instance name, it will be unique by device.
Right. And if we do that, then I guess, is there a way for us to populate the environment variables array later instead of doing it in discovery handler? Because the instance name was created in the agent. When the agent already has the information of whether the devices are shared, and based on that, they will compute the hash, right? And I don't think the discovery handler has the information. So if we want to do that, maybe we'll have to somehow populate, like store the information somewhere and then populate later.
No, I believe I looked at this a little, and so what the agent does is for every device we discover, it creates a device plugin. And when it does that, then it can add specific device properties. And what the agent does when it does that is it decides this is the environment variable for this protocol and sets that as the property. I believe we could just have the agent modify that for each device. So when it just takes that and appends an all caps suffix, that's the instance name, and makes that the new, like the agent can take that action is what I'm saying. The discovery handler still doesn't need that information.
Right. Okay. But the agent also got this information from the discovery handler, right? Let's just say we have an array of all the environment variables. I believe the agent also got this from the discovery handler. So the discovery handler also has somehow need to store this information and pass it on to agent where they can modify it. Is that correct?
Yeah, essentially. I'm looking it up right now. Like in the code where this happens. Doo-doo. 1 second. Okay, let me share my screen. Oh, does someone mind giving me host access? Thanks. Okay. All right. So essentially we've deployed a broker that wants to use this device. And so now allocate is when the controller has scheduled that broker, or when a user schedules a broker using an Akri instance, what happens is before the container is allowed to run, Kubelet will call allocate on the appropriate device plugin, which the agent is running. So the agent receives that allocate call. And what that's saying is, hey, let me use this device and give me any information I need to pass to this container, namely these environment variables, once I run it. And so allocate's called, and we then create a container allocate response. So this is a part of the device plugin API. And this is where you're saying all the devices that can go in this container. And they have different environment variables. They have different, you can set different annotations, devices, and mounts. If we go here, let's see where we're doing this. Build container allocate response looks like the right spot. And environment variables is what we're going to want. So broker properties, which is being passed in here, which is that hash map. So this is where we would have to add a little bit more. So I think this is the point you were saying, Harrison, is like the agent just gets these environment variables. It doesn't know what to do with them. So one thing we could do here is essentially we could add an Akri prefix to all of these environment variables that are set by Akri. And then we could have a step here where the agent finds all ones with an Akri prefix and adds the instance name as a suffix. That could be an option as one way, but this also leads to the point where this is set by the discovery handler. And so ideally we would be able to, ideally, like this is already a defined list with that uniqueness. So yeah, I guess the options are: one, we have the agent do some introspection here before it sets these environment variables, or option two, like you were saying, Harrison, somehow let the discovery handler set this appropriately. Yeah, but I don't know. What are your thoughts on this, Harrison?
I think this way also makes sense. I wasn't familiar with the code base enough to find a way to do that. And if we were to do it this way for the broker properties, I think for discovery handler to pass this one into the agent, it also needs to somehow specify which, like I said, which environment variable is corresponding to which devices, so that the Akri agent can do something more to add on to the naming for the broker, right? And I guess like I just couldn't wrap my head around like how we can do it in Discovery Hunter, because like it just doesn't have enough information, where I think most of the information are stored inside the agent. And it would make sense to, I guess, do it in agent since it has everything for us to do it. But I guess like I can try to do something around it with this direction. I just didn't know how to do it before.
No, I think it's a tricky problem. Like this is messy. Like if we have the agent go in here and change this list based on an assumption that we're allowed to change everything with an Akri prefix to have an instance suffix, like that's a lot of assumptions and that's not super pretty. So I think the point being made here is we need to think about it more. Because we do need these environment variables to be unique, or we need to find other ways to pass more information. So let's like Harrison, maybe we can start a thread on this, revive this thread. Maybe I'll try and summarize what I said here in that thread. I'm putting some to-dos on myself, so feel free if I set a to-do that involves something you're working on, just bump me if I forget to do it. And then we can maybe pick up the conversation there.
Yep, sounds good to me. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, sounds great.
All right. Do you think you could give me host back, Kate?
Yeah, 1 second. Awesome. Eugen, it should be yours.
Okay. So the next issue is updating the OPCUA demo to use containerized PLC servers. So Harrison actually worked on this and we've updated the docs accordingly. So this is all good to go. The next one is allow for you.
Sorry, 1 second. Did we remove the previous broker from our code base?
Harrison, do you?
The broker didn't really have any change. We just changed the OPC server side. The broker only, I guess, I only made one change, which is very minor, but it works the same way. It just we changed the demo to use the OPC PLC server.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Sounds good.
Might I contribute something to this topic, if I may?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, so most of you probably might not know me. I've been around in and out in Akri for quite a while now. But in terms of the OPCUA stuff, I completely understand the whole containerized PLC server. At this point of time, I have resources, so to say, in terms of actual systems that we can leverage. If you guys need some help in terms of getting a live OPCUA demo with Akri, I'd be pretty happy to help the team out. What I could offer at this point of time is where I work. I'm in at Emerson Automation Solutions. So we do have a nice, let's call it a Lego-based toy factory, which actually runs and gets programmed on PLCs. And we do support OPCUA servers on them. So if I might figure out some time to actually start integrating this particular stuff, at least from my side, with an actual system, and hopefully I can contribute back to the project somehow.
Yeah, first of all, it's good to meet you. I don't think I've seen you on the meetings quite yet since I'm pretty new as well. But yeah, I think that sounds like a really great idea. If you could, keep us updated on the Slack, I think that would be great.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, I'm pretty much active on Slack, but yeah, it's unfortunate because I'm in Europe and most of the Pacific time just generally doesn't end up
Yeah.
for me so to attend the meeting. So, but yeah, I think I'll keep up. I'll try to. Anyways, I have to deep dive back into Akri because it's been a while since I've seen the code base. So I'll keep. At least I'll keep something posted at least in the Slack channel first, and then if need be, then I'll open some certain issues or discussions regarding that.
Perfect. That
Thank you.
sounds good. Thank you.
Always good to see you.
You too, Kate.
So the next one is allow for UDEV rules without dev node. It looks like this one has been closed. Kate, do you have any dates on this?
Yeah, so our original discovery handler for UDEV required that made this assumption that all the devices we want to discover have a dev node. So that's something in the path of /dev. But that's not always the case. Sometimes you want to discover things, as in Andrew's case, where it only has a syspath. And so this uses syspath instead of dev path as the identifier, which was honestly what we should have been doing from the start. So it was a pretty small change, but it opens up a lot more scenarios.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for that. Are there any more thoughts on this?
No, the change works as expected.
All right, and the next issue is reducing the size of Akri's containers. It looks like Audie was working on this. Do you have any updates?
Yeah, I just commented on this. I think I kind of just dropped the ball on this since it's like one of the smaller ones, but today I'll work on it and I'll ping Andrew and Kate on this. I think the last update we had was trying to see why Docker Shim got it to 32 MB. When I last checked the image I had, it was basically just compressing everything and then whatever it had seen like while it was running, it had tried to like emulate, but I don't know if it was like doing the entire end-to-end scenario. And that was like what my worry was. So I'll like have to like, I have the image still right now, so I'll have to like reopen it and then see how it got down to like 32 MB. It was probably just like a compressed tarball for the binaries and then something else that it was like mounting. So yeah, I can work on that today.
Cool, thank you. Okay, and then we have enable UDEV discovery handler to discover multiple node devices. So it looks like no one has been assigned yet. Do we want to try just right now? Or does anyone have any questions about this?
I think I can summarize what's going on here. Essentially, some devices have multiple require multiple dev nodes or dev paths all together consist of one device. So for example, a IP camera may have both the video 0 and video 1 dev nodes comprise the functionality of that camera. And so a way within the UDEV discovery handler to say, hey, I need you to mount all of these, give access to this broker, all of these dev paths for this one device. So we need to think more about this because right now the UDEV discovery handler does filtering to wean down to one. So we need a way to say everything that has this property, or this is all that I want, something along those lines. And it might be easy also just to be kind of explicit, like be able to say, I want exactly this. And the UDEV discovery handler can be like, great, that's available, here you go. I don't know, but we need more thought around this. And that should probably be driven by someone who's using that scenario, so that we know it's at least fulfilling someone's needs. Because with UW, it's really hard to be general. With like you're always being too specific, I guess, is what I'm trying to say, because there's so many different ways people use devices in Linux device file systems. So it's really hard to have a generalized solution for something because you never know if you're hitting anyone's target. So this might be something that someone needs to do their own spin-off discovery handler with to meet their own needs. But yeah, which is another topic, is how do we make our discovery handlers extensible in themselves? Like if someone needs a very specific way to use an ONVIF discovery handler, they can go ahead and, do their own thing. And that's another reason why putting them in their own repositories could be better, because people can just fork that repository and kind of get it to work the way they want. But that's an aside note.
Got it, got it. Yeah, Andrew, did you want to say something?
No, I was just going to say WebAssembly.
Oh my gosh. Wow, love that shout out. Yes, would love to hear more of your thoughts on why that is the solution to this. Are you saying yeah, wait, actually say more. What way do you think WebAssembly fixes the solution?
I mean, I'm not sure that it fixes it, but I think it could potentially help, because you get to kind of give the platform and all the different extension places, but then the logic of how everything works can be completely customized without somebody needing to know Rust, right? Because right now the barrier to entry is they need to know Rust, which sadly is not the case for a lot of people.
Okay, so you're saying if our discovery handlers were WebAssemblies, then it'd be easier for people to make their own discovery handler because they could do it in their language of choice.
Yes.
Okay.
But then you start getting into the issue of like, what system interfaces do you expose? And then there's a hole, right? You know the rabbit hole you go down.
Yeah,
Wait,
well,
you
I
know
think
that better than I.
a few thoughts on that. One is discovery handlers are behind a gRPC interface, so you can implement them in any language you want already. So that's a starter. Is that like you can implement this in a different language, which we need to prioritize. So like all feature discovery handlers we should prioritize that they're in other languages just to like prove that concept. And the other is, yeah, I think WebAssembly is too young for these kind of things. Like, you can't discovery is really tricky with WebAssembly. For example, like you have to explicitly declare what outbound HTTP endpoints you can hit. And when you're doing discovery, that's really hard. Like, right, you're trying to see which endpoints are available. So you're going to probably open up too much, and then you're ruining the whole point of a WebAssembly sandbox. So I don't think WebAssembly is the right use case for something that has a generalized or a non-specific action, such as a discovery handler, which is not sure what it's going to be discovering or what devices it's going to be using. I think WebAssembly could be the right thing for our brokers, for example. Like if down the line we had something where device plugin did the equivalent of telling Wasmtime, the WebAssembly runtime, this is the device node, the path, the sys path for the one device you're allowed to use, go execute and use it. That the broker side of the Akri story makes more sense for WebAssembly for me.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Cool.
Okay, just to add to this point, do you think the I think you mentioned it once, there's this thing called this special interest group called the node feature discovery stuff. Does that somehow play a role over here where you can say that, okay, this node particularly has certain device, certain, I don't know, these kind of file descriptors open or available, and then let the broker decide to deploy certain pods on this particular instance because it has discovered this so-called interface on it?
Yeah, I think node feature discovery is an alternative to the device plugin interface / Akri. And I also think I've mentioned dynamic resource allocation, which is now being proposed as an alternative to device plugins. But Yeah, I think you could do something with node feature discovery, just as you could with Akri. The idea of node feature discovery, kind of as you were saying, is there's an operator that's essentially looking for devices, and when it discovers them, it creates node labels. So the delta between Akri and node feature discovery is upon discovery, node feature discovery puts a a node label or on a node saying this is available. And then Akri creates a resource on that node. So yeah, that's the difference. I think the device plugin interface is a little bit more drilled in because you're creating a resource and then you're saying if anyone uses this resource, this is what comes with it. These are the dev mounts that come with it, the annotations that come with it, the environment variables. Node feature discovery doesn't do that. It just says, we now know this device is accessible from this node, the end of the story. So that I don't see the WebAssembly picture there isn't a unique story for me. But how you were like, you could do something that like watches when a label is created on a node and then deploys a WebAssembly module to it. So yeah, that story could exist in that world as well. I don't know if that answered your question or shared anything to that.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, yeah, sure. It's a bit complex to start imagining these kind of things. Yeah.
But it does sound like we have some interest around what does WebAssembly plus Akri mean? And now that we have container deshims for deploying WebAssembly on Kubernetes with Runwazi, it might be an interesting breakout to have an exploration of what is Akri with WASM. What does that story mean?
All right, I'm just gonna quickly go over to this last issue. List and watch only send devices when the list has changed. It looks like Harrison has worked on this. Do you want to give just a quick update, Harrison?
Yes. I think this one already has the PR approved and merged the change. I worked on this a while back with Kate, and basically just we did some extra checking to make sure if the list of the devices changed, then we'll update it. Otherwise, we don't perform any action.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for working on this. So yeah, it looks like we just have, these couple more issues open. Do we want to continue with issue triage? Do folks have time?
I think it might be best maybe to stick to the time that we allotted. But yeah, I guess the only thing is there's issues out there if you're interested in contributing. Comment on an issue. There's a couple that are a little bit more high priority based on people wanting them, in particular OnBIF, discovering authenticated cameras. That conversation has come back up for like the 20th time, it feels like. And also how we handle what's on basically how we handle requesting a device within the agent. Essentially, if a slot is already taken, we'll say that you have to try again, and it makes brokers restart, and that's not a great user experience. So there's another issue on that. So if you're interested in taking anything on, there's plenty. Feel free to also put in Slack.
Awesome, sounds good. Are there any last minute thoughts anyone wants to add before we hop off? Alrighty then, thank you everyone for attending and we'll see you next month.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.